Really pleased to welcome to the show Mike Donahue. He is the founder and director of Value Up. And there is so much that he has done, that he has focused on with his company, with his speaking. He's influenced so many students. That's the idea, positive school culture. And he's a highly sought after motivational speaker. And he talks about bullying, resilience, and so many other things when you look at what's going on in schools. So, Mike, thanks so much for coming on Author's Corner here on America Tonight with me, Kate Delaney.
My pleasure.
Let's talk about this one. You've written several books. What's different about talking to brick walls? Your teenager wants to talk to you.
Well, I wanted to communicate to parents that young people really do want to talk to their parents. I know that sounds very counterintuitive to what they're probably experiencing, because their kids put up walls and act like they don't really want to talk to the parents. But when I actually ask students, and the way I put it to them is I say, if there was no emotional penalty for honesty when you share with your parents, how many of you in this room would open up more to your parents if you could? And all their hands go up, but that's the issue. The issue isn't that they want to keep information away. It's that information could get them in trouble, could get them in a weird spot where they're really vulnerable. So they keep that information back. But that's exactly what you want as a parent. You want information. You want to know what's really going on inside the heads of young people, because that's where a lot of the conflict comes, and a lot of the tension that they feel, and potentially dangerous tension that they feel as they're navigating their world.
Yeah, for you, and you've in speaking to these hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of students, you've seen it. If the walls are up there and there is no communication, of course the suicide rates have gone up, and that's just so sad and so depressing. And I'm so glad you're out there reaching these kids, because that's just an awful thing.
Right. So one of the chapters in the book is called Hidden in Plain Sight. And it's what they deal with. They hide their real lives right in plain sight, right? They could be sitting at the dinner table, and this whole world that they have to negotiate, their social world that's opened up to them when they turn 13, they become adolescents. That social world takes on a whole new meaning. I call it a government. I think there's two governments that young people have to negotiate every single day. Right. One is the adult government, which is, obviously parents, coaches, administrators, teachers, anybody in their adult world that has expectations for them to live out, a certain lifestyle. Right. But then they have to walk into their school every day, spend 8 hours or more in their school. If they're into sports and things like that, then activities, then it's more. But they have that social world that has demands and expectations and consequences for not following those expectations. And those two worlds are diametrically opposed to each other. They fly right in the face. The values fly right in the face of each other, and so these kids have to navigate these two very real governments that demand things from them. And there's a lot of tension, a lot of pressure that comes with that.
Yeah, and when you and I talked to the air, what really popped out at me: image managers. Wow.
Right.
Talk about that. That's hard.
Oh, I had a teacher come to me one time, and he said he had a student come to him, and this really illustrates what image management is about. The kid came to him and said, "Look, every time you tell the class I got an A on the test, or on an assignment or whatever," he said, "you have no idea when I walk out in the hallway, I get so much crap from the kids. So please stop doing that. Stop announcing my name and my grade in front of the class." Here was this teacher thinking he was doing the right thing by, promoting what, this good grades, and the kid, was doing his homework and all that kind of thing. And the kid was telling him to stop because he had to manage these two worlds. He basically was getting the A. He was doing what, he believed that was right, but out in the hallway, he had to act like that was no big deal because he was trying to manage these two worlds that they live in. And that's what kids face all day long is we send out an information sheet to principals. We ask them to tell us about their school. And it's really just to help us see if there's been any kind of tragedies and that kind of thing that we need to keep an eye on and make sure we're not putting our foot in our mouths and things like that. But it comes back and it never fails. It's at least 85% of the things that come back say to us that the kids are dealing with apathy. Apathy means they don't care. I don't believe that. I think they really do care about what adults think about, but the penalty for not going along with the social government, which again is in opposition of the adult government, they have to pretend that doesn't matter to them. So socially, they're out there pretending that what matters doesn't matter, but it really does matter to them. So that's why that tension is so fluid. It's so real to them.
Yeah, I want to make sure people know this. They can go to your website, value-up.org. Also, you can get this book, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever great books are sold. For 20 years, you were a youth pastor. I mean, kids. Tell us about your background for people who don't know.
Well, I came from Boston, South Boston, Massachusetts. I grew up in a dysfunctional home. There was a lot of, my dad left when I was 5. My mom was really ill-equipped to handle what she had to handle. And so there was a lot of things that were missed. I used drugs and alcohol mainly as a self-medication type of, apparatus for me. I just needed to numb a lot of the pain that went on in my life. There was some abuse. There was some sexual abuse that happened, pedophiles in our neighborhood and things like that. And so by the time I got into high school, I had a value issue. I always tell kids that I didn't have a drug abuse problem. I had a mic abuse problem. I didn't really value myself. And so when I got involved in church, and we don't do a church message in schools at all, obviously because that's illegal and it's really not the point anyways. The point that I'm trying to make in the school is for young people to understand that they have intrinsic value, that their value is intrinsic. It came with them, right? There's nothing they can do to lose that value. They can surrender it, which a lot of them do, but you can't lose it. Nobody can take that from you. And that's what I had to learn through growing up, in Boston and all that mess that happened to me. When I finally did realize that all that time I had value, it wasn't based on what I did or didn't do. I was born with that value. And so when I started walking in that value, valuing up, so to speak, it changed everything. It changed the way I approached how I learned, who I interacted with. It changed the way I treated people, because my natural, the benevolence comes out of how you feel about yourself. So when I really began to see that I was valuable, I began to treat other people like they had value. And that's our message in schools, is to help young people value up.
Yeah, you talked about in your book, you mentioned this already, we talked about hidden in plain sight, which I think is such a big chapter, but you also talk about all kinds of things: blended families, helicopters and lawnmowers, culture change. And I love this one because I think this is so big. It goes back to the social media aspect of things that kids are navigating. Let's talk TikTok. Tell us what you talk about in that chapter. Well,
you wouldn't hand your child a loaded gun, right? You wouldn't give them the keys to a Corvette without training. The internet, social media platforms, it's a loaded gun. I mean, there is a lot of power that comes with that apparatus, right? And so that chapter is basically to help parents just, not to scare them, but to sober them up a little bit on what exactly they're handing to their child when they give them a smartphone. And so what access those kids have now to all this information, what that can do. And so it's just really a walkthrough on first of all, what it is. And then the second half of that chapter is what you can do as a parent to safeguard your child from pedophiles, from sex traffickers, from, them being bullies online, being a good digital citizen. It's a contract between the parent and the child. That the parent just can't hand them that phone and just walk away and say good luck. I mean, you wouldn't do that if it was a a race car or, that kind of thing. So it's just really just navigating the power of that thing.
Yeah. You've said this throughout the conversation, but it's worth really kind of wrapping it up with this. What do you hope parents take away from, anyone can read this book, Talking to Brick Walls, your teenager wants to talk to you. What do you hope the takeaway is?
Chapter 5 is my favorite chapter. It's called The Privilege of Process. It really comes down to listening to your child. You have to listen to the tension that they're feeling between these two governments. And you've got to shift your concept or your dynamic to being more of a consultant than you are the CEO of your family. You when they turn 13, you're preparing them for adulthood. You're preparing them to think for themselves, to think critically, and that requires you listening and feeling that tension and giving them the privilege to work those things out with your guidance instead of controlling them, because you're not going to be able to when they turn 18 anyway. So it's really that's what I want to help parents with, is listening to your child and then walking them through and coaching them through some of these, heavier things.
Yeah, such an important book. Talking to Brick Walls, your teenager wants to talk to you. By the way, there's also a podcast, which people can find on the normal platforms, right?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thank you so much, Mike. Really, really insightful. And I know you've got other books that people can find too. They can go to your website that I mentioned before as well. So thanks.
My pleasure. It's been great. Thank you.
So interesting what he does and how many thousands of schools and educators and students that he's worked with. He really understands this. And it's such a tragedy when we lose kids to suicide, and you think about the pressures and he's talking about. I mean, social media has just really changed the game, and how tough for kids and what they have to deal with, like bullying, etc. Wow, important man and important book.